So now let's talk about comments and multi-line strings. So an important thing whenever you're going to be creating your scripts is commenting what you're doing. So you're going to be writing out your script, and something that you have to think about is what happens when you come back to the script after 6 months, or somebody else has to go and modify your script a couple of years from now. Will you or they be able to understand what the hell you wrote? Right? So that's the idea behind comments. When you create a function, when you create a block of code, you add a comment before that block of code to say what it's supposed to be doing. Why does this code exist? So in the Python world, there's a couple of ways to do comments. So this is one of those syntax things where depending on what programming language you're using, there's different ways to do comments. So basically in the Python world, you can either use the pound or the hash sign in front of a line of code, and so that will comment out that line of code. What that means is Python will skip over it. It will not try to run that line of code, and generally that is used, again, for you being able to do documentation for your code. Or what you can do if you need a multi-line comment for some reason is you use the single quotation marks or the double quotation marks, and you do 3 quotation marks, whatever it is you want to say, and then you close with 3 quotation marks, and that will give you a multi-line comment. The valuable thing about commenting too is beyond the documentation is this is an easy way to disable components of your code so that you can try to do troubleshooting, right? So when you go and you're writing your code, you may have a block of code that you know works, or frankly you don't really care about right now. So one of the things you can do is you can comment that out so that you can focus on the block of code that you actually care about, make sure that code is working properly, uncomment out the code that you had disabled, and then make sure everything goes together. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about comments. So here's an example of how comments work in VS Code. So we have a single line comment here, and in VS Code by default that's going to be green. So we can see we have the pound, the hash symbol here, and then we have that single line of a comment. Of single line comments, use the hash symbol, right? So that line is basically not going to be read by Python. Then we can come down here to the multi-line comment, where you can see we open with 3 single quotation marks, we close with 3 single quotation marks, and then we have our multi-line comment in between. Again, this will also not be try to be processed by Python. Then at the end of this, just to kind of show you how this works, we have simply print hello. Hello, is anybody there? Just to show you that Python is going to skip everything else and basically just run that print command, that print function. So all we have there is hello. Everything else that has been commented out, you basically, it does not function in Python. One of the other things to take a look at is you can actually do key presses or whatever to basically comment out multiple lines or uncomment out multiple lines. So with the Mac, you can use command / and that will basically do this, where it will single line comment out, but it will do that for multiple lines. This is actually what a lot of people do when they're commenting in the Python world. It's kind of one of those styling versus syntax. They'll just comment out multiple lines this way instead of using the triple quotation marks. In order to get rid of these, you either use command or control / again, and those go away. If you want to wrap all of this within the triple quotation marks, it is Option Shift A or Alt Shift A. And again, it will do the same type of thing where here, since it already has the single quotation marks, it does 3 quotation marks and then does 3 quotation marks here to wrap all of that in to that multi-line comment. And so those are some of the key presses that you can do to try to make this easier. You will notice a lot of times when I'm demonstrating code, I will use the command / just to do this. So again, I can just disable entire blocks of code really quickly, and then when I want them back, I just do command / again, and they come back and they're functional for me. So this really all there is to comments. Now, within the same vein is the concept of multi-line strings. Basically, what happens when you have a big string that you either want to print out to the screen or maybe you want to write to a text file, something like that, and you just want to be able to write it out in one go. You don't want to have to, do a lot of slash ins and that type of thing to make that work out. So basically here what we have is we have message equals 3 quotation marks, either single or double. We start what the message is, what the string is, and then we do the additional line. So this is a next line, multi-line string, next line. It is good for writing HTML and such, right? That's kind of one of the things you can use this type of thing for, so that it's easier to write these long strings when you want them on multiple lines. There's not a lot to it. Again, simply open with the triple quotation marks, close with the triple quotation marks. When we print this out here, we're going to see there we go. This is a multi-line string. It is good for writing HTML or such. The one thing to be careful about though is basically all the formatting will stay with this, right? So let's say you tab in. So you tab in like this because for styling purposes you want to make it look a little prettier. The issue is when you write this, you'll notice when you write it, when you do it now, it is tabbed in, right? Again, like if I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to line it up, PEP 8 standards, maybe I'm thinking I want to try to line this up that way. Again, if I try to print this now, you'll notice all of this is shifted across the screen. So there's ways to deal with that we may talk about later. This is just kind of one of those things just to consider as you're using these multi-line strings. If you're using multi-line strings, is the formatting you put in the multi-line string will show up either in the command line or the text file that you're writing to. So that's all there is to comments and multi-line strings. An incredibly simple concept. Use the hash symbol or use the 3 quotation marks and you'll be good to go. The more important thing is to be thinking about this when you are writing code and to document your code mostly for yourself. When we talk about documenting code, right, putting in comments, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to waste the time for somebody else, right? The idea is that somebody else is going to be reading your code and they're just going to have to suck it up and figure out what you were trying to do. Let me tell you, being in the technology world for a couple of decades at this point, most likely what's going to happen is you are going to write your code, you're going to put it aside for a couple weeks, you're going to come back to it, and then you're just going to be staring at your code. And you are the one that's going to be looking at the code that you wrote going, what was I doing here? What was I doing? So if you put some comments in there, if for no other reason to make your life easier when you come back to the code, that's going to be a good thing all the way around.